To everybody. I'm really happy to be here with all of you here in the room. We have several folks here that have accompanied us here in the Surdna Foundation office, and also a lot of participants that have joined via Zoom and the phone. My name is Cindy Wiesner, and I'm the National Coordinator of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And I'm going to be looking here at the computer, but I'm also going to be looking here. So for folks, bear with us. We are trying this very high-level technological process of being able to have folks online and virtually and also here in the room. So want to just, again, thank everyone who is joining us for this hour. We have a pretty packed presentation, and also we're trying to leave room for question and answers and conversation. We are really honored that Surdna Foundation co-partnered with us to be able to sponsor this discussion. And part of what we're trying to do is just share some of our thinking about what does visionary opposition look like in the era of Trumpism, right? Many of us never thought we would be here, and here we are. And I think that there's so many questions, but I think that we hope to offer some of our work, some of our thinking, and some of our solutions in this moment. And so we partnered also with some of our sister alliances, the Climate Justice Alliance, Right to the City Alliance, and the Indigenous Environmental Alliance, along with the organization that I work with, the Alliance, Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, to come together to be do this funder briefing, but also to be able to share about some of our collective work in this period. And so we are going to go through 4 panelists, and starting with myself, and then Kandi Mossett from the Indigenous Environmental Network, all the way from Standing Rock, and Don Phillips, the current director of Right to the City Alliance, and also program director at Causa, Justa, Just Cause in Oakland. And then ending with Angela Adrar, who is our new executive director at the Climate Justice Alliance. We hope to do about 5 to 7 minutes each, and then we will open it up for question and answer. And so we have also Shah Grogan Brown, who's my colleague, who is helping person the technology. And then we also have Mateo Ruz from Movement Generation, who is helping, also is going to be fielding some of the questions. And so we're asking folks to write in their questions, those of you who are in the Zoom, to be able to use the chat feature there. And then obviously here, we'll open it up for questions first based on the technology here. And then yeah, and our hope is to be able to wrap up by 1 o'clock, because we know this room is being used right at 1 o'clock Eastern. Oh, we have, okay, so thank you so much. Great, thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, you know, I think that the night of the election, I live in Miami, and I was up late that night as we were watching the results, and a whole bunch of domestic workers from the National Domestic Workers Alliance had come to do get out the vote work. And we had been doing also, we had just done the previous day an action, a GOP hands off me action in front of the Trump Tower. And as we were preparing for the next day, we all believed that you know, we would be making demands on President-elect Clinton around what women of color's needs were going to be, and we were preparing with all these women across the country to do an R100 hours of action to lift up demands. That morning. The next morning, like many of us, millions of people across this country, I woke up to the level of grief, and I think in a lot of ways the level of terror that like really swept through my body, and I like cried, you know. And I feel like to me it was like I think that I heard so many people really talk about what that feeling was. And I thought about what the Trump presidency would mean, not only for our members, for the women that we had been doing Get Out the Vote work in Miami with, but also to our movement allies and to the rest of the world. We do a lot of work with international folks and thinking about what the Trump administration would mean to international folks as well. And so, you know, I allowed myself to have that moment. And that day we had planned an action in Miami. And so we went ahead with it. And one of the things about being in the streets that day with my compañeras was we really demonstrated the resistance, the power, and I think the love that we had for one another. And I think taking action that day really restored the foundational knowledge, right? That always going back to the basics about that together, we're gonna be able to face the dangers ahead and really build the conditions for our collective liberation. And part of what I'm really proud to share is that the alliances that, you know, we've been working together in this past period is really made up about a lot of those visionary organizations and peoples that have really known that we got to be able to be together and have that solidarity and be able to move in this period. And so for us, this past year, we've been trying to understand what this movement moment means in terms of this fight back, this resistance, this opposition. And while our alliances and our communities are preparing for a period of that fight back and resistance, we're also identifying opportunities to work together.
Sorry, folks, it looks like we may have just dropped the audio, so please bear with us.
Oh, for me to call back in. Should we just have you come back to this?
You're back. You're back now, Cindy. Sorry about that.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know where you lost me, but I'll just keep going where I was. So I want to share three sort of points: movement alignment, visionary opposition, taking bold risk, and laying out the groundwork for the long term. All right, so we're good? All right, awesome. So alignment. So one of the immediate reactions that many of our members had was obviously to reach out to each other and really to figure out how it is people wanted to connect with folks and hear what were people thinking, what are people going to do, and they wanted to also look for community and also most importantly what that strategy for hope was. I think that this moment also provided an opportunity. You know, some of the first phone calls that many of us made was made to other partners and other movement allies, and this historical kind of intentional movement alignment began between Climate Justice Alliance, the Grassroots Global Justice, Indigenous Environmental Network, and IEN. We have all been in the streets together. We've all been working together at different moments, but I think that we felt that it was really key and critical to be able to begin to pose what a visionary opposition would look like. And we've also been in conversations with other movement partners, people from the I got lost again. I'm wondering if I should.
Just transition over to the video.
Yeah,
You're back.
I'm back, but I'm muted. I'm back. All right, sorry, y'all. It keeps telling me the internet connection is unstable.
Should we just move over to this one?
All right, Shao, what would happen if I move to the other computer? Can I do that? Sorry, y'all, bear with us. Technology.
We can
love
try it.
hate
The one concern is just about audio in the room. So as long as audio in the room from the computer is muted, you should be able to speak on that computer.
Okay, okay, great. So let me try.
Thanks, everyone. Bear with us.
Okay. All right. Can you see me now? Yeah?
Yep, you're good.
Thumbs up. Hey, thank you all. All right, let me go back to it. So we've been having these broad array of conversations with movement allies and being able to bring together folks into these dialogues of again about how are we assessing this period? What are we trying to do? We've been also in close communication with international movement allies. One, because of their solidarity. Many people have extended their solidarity to us in terms of what's happening in the United States, but also to learn from them in terms of what what are their organizing strategies in this moment of resistance, because they've either lived under right-wing regimes and are actively fighting them. And because we also know that whatever happens in the United States is also going to have ripple effects globally. And so for the past decade, as Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, we've been doing this work of movement convergence and really being able to help bring together movements to in a lot of ways have the necessary conversations and plan the necessary collaboration to be able to articulate what that bigger we is. And these efforts, right, of being able to cohere our movement is what I believe is going to bring us to scale. One, this alignment of folks, the strategic alignment between alliances, sister alliances that want to do intentional work together, but also an tactical alignment with other folks. And and I think that's something that's beginning to happen. So the second piece is really about visionary opposition and really building the resistance, the left, and preparing ourselves to be both on the defensive but also on the offensive. And for us, it means mobilizing support to the struggle of Standing Rock. Immediately after the election results happened, we knew that more than ever, we had to, all of us, all hands on deck, and really supporting the struggle at Standing Rock, because we knew what that was gonna have, the implications of what that meant. And Kandi will speak to this next. We've been having a series of strategy meetings within the climate and environmental justice work that we've been doing. We've also been having these meetings across sectors. And we are launching a mobilization next week that includes trainings and strategic conversations to prepare for what's ahead. So our 4 alliances are bringing together our members for a training lab and for strategic conversations about how we're going to do work and translocal actions that Don will be speaking to. And so for us, this moment of resistance, it has to be able to be, to build up our capacity and segue for this visionary opposition. And that's why we're choosing mobilization, capacity building and training, and then really beginning to think about the sites of struggle as being local. We think that the framing and the politics and the practice that we've been doing already for years around just transition, rebel cities, around land and housing, reclaiming feminism at the grassroots internationalism, a joint struggle perspective of solidarity, and the protection of the sacred are key frames, and I think are key ways to be able to give people an opportunity to how to think about this moment. And then number 3, about the third point is around taking bold risk and laying the groundwork for the long term and really daring to hope. People are really hungry for that hopeful vision. And I think that the Trump administration is really showing us very clearly from yesterday's press conference to who the cabinet positions that he's appointing, that we have to be able to build this vision, and that we have to use everything in this moment to build and strengthen the long-term organizing, the base building, the counter-hegemonic campaigning, the political consciousness and training. And we've seen examples where this work has really shown itself from our member group, APEN, that has been doing, and the Communities for Better Environment in Richmond, California, where people have organized civic engagement and won policies that have been implemented at the local level. We've seen also examples like Detroit, where residents have no democratic avenues to hold the emergency manager accountable. And so one of their solutions is actually to begin to build alternatives and reclaim democracy from the grassroots. And for us, and then people are drawing from the historic roots of community defense models, right? Especially in the red states. And we have a lot to learn from those organizations and those organizers, people who have been living in Trump-like conditions. Not exactly the same, but there's a lot of lessons there to learn. And basically for us, we have our short-term plans, which is really starting next week with the It Takes Roots to Grow the Resistance delegation that is coming together in Washington, D.C. and working with a broader array of organizers from the direct action community to the peace movement, to the climate movement, and obviously the women's movement. We're planning a women of color and gender nonconforming contingent at the Women's March, and being able to really be clear about how we put out that message. And then the midterm sort of goals and looking at these next 100 days, both for kicking off a series of translocal actions, but also having alignment meetings with different partners and elevating our demands and framework to movement demands. And then the long term is really thinking about at the national level, at the electoral level, like what are some opportunities for us to push a platform and places of struggle and not give up different places that we've made a lot of inroads, whether it's at the UN, around the climate negotiations, whether it's at different sort of spaces, and how to be able to develop strategies around that. So Angela will be sharing some of those long-term visions and goals as well. So I will stop there, and thank you all for bearing with the technological issues online, but also to folks here. So thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Kandi that's next. My compañera Kandi Mossett from Indigenous Environmental Network.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
I was like, you have to unmute me. They won't let me unmute myself. So if you could pull up the screen, the slides, that would be great. Thank you, Cindy. You're amazing. So I'm going to just go ahead and introduce myself in my language of Hidatsa. And so I'd say Dosha Margua Marashima Ishuia Hets. And what I said is, hello relatives. My name is Eagle Woman. My English name is Kandi Mossett, and I am from North Dakota, born and raised on the Fort Berthold Reservation, the Mandan Hidatsa Rikra Nations. And I've been working with the Indigenous Environmental Network since 2007, so about a decade now. Holy smokes, that's crazy. I'm getting old, but I'm here at Standing Rock. I am coming to you live from the Prairie Knights Casino right now because it is cold here. It's like negative something. We're in wind chill warnings here, so it's like negative 35 or 50 or something like that. And so, yeah, just a picture here of this oil rig, which has kind of like become our life here in North Dakota as a result of the fracking industry. And it's really an interesting thing, this whole thing between Trump and Clinton, because you may or may not know, but Hillary Clinton was actually pushing natural gas as a bridge fuel. And we were really, really concerned here in North Dakota about that whole issue because the fracking is involved with the natural gas, but here in this state, they're just flaring all the natural gas into the atmosphere, and we are now the methane hotspot of the country, if not the world, because of methane emissions, which are more potent than the carbon dioxide emissions. And we already have 7 coal-fired power plants here. And so I have been working across the country with people like Black Mesa Water Coalition, organizations to shut down coal plants and Peabody Coal. And so it was just kind of like really scary to think of Clinton, even scarier to think of Trump. And so we're kind of like at an impasse with both of them. But if you could go to the next one, I'm here. Oh, this is our symbol for the Mandan Hidatsa Rikara Nations, our chiefs from the old days that actually signed the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, of which we are a part of. Some of you might have been hearing a lot about treaties and treaty rights, and I think that's the biggest thing that separates us as an Indigenous movement, a Native movement, is that here in this country, we do have treaties that we signed with this federal government, none of which have ever been upheld by the federal government. And now a lot of the tribes are pushing back, saying that if you want to abide by the law in this country, you have to abide by the treaties. And we're pulling out all of these old treaties that were signed and never upheld and saying, this is what we're going to use to stop you. And as a result of Standing Rock, we've had other tribes that have stepped up and said, we don't want this pipeline here. We don't want you coming through here. It's kind of like a really exciting time for us, even though it's a scary time because of President-elect Donald Trump. I'm laughing because it's so weird for me to say it. It just seems so strange. So if you go to the next slide, here, I don't even, okay, keep going. Yeah, so here, the camp is called Ocheti Shakonwi, and that came as a result of the 7 council fires. And this whole thing started with the youth, with the millennials, of which I am still a part of. I had to look it up to see how old I am and what is a millennial. I'm right on the edge, but I'm still a millennial, and I'm pretty proud of it because it's just a generation that's been just really forcing change and saying, look, we're going to have to deal with this. And so you're going to have to deal with us as a result of us wanting clean drinking water. And so, back in August, we just, a call out was put out, like, come stand with Standing Rock. And at one point there was about, probably at the highest point, 15,000 people here, which to me just showed us that this country is ready for change, that people are craving something different to happen in a good way, to move away from the fossil fuel industry and into a new clean renewable energy economy. And for us, we do it through culture and tradition. And for people that are not Native, they can do it through culture and tradition because everybody has a background. Everybody has something called blood memory that they can go back to and that they can remember who they are, where they came from. And so that, I think, is the most powerful thing about the movement as a whole. So if you want to go to the next slide here, Shah, just to give you guys a perspective of what it looks like here for this pipeline route. The dotted line is the original route that went just north of Bismarck, North Dakota. And so Bismarck, North Dakota is a 92% white community, and they did not want the pipeline to go here. And so the pipeline had several routes actually that were proposed. This was one of them. This one failed. And in addition to this here, you can't see way up further north, but up over here in North Dakota is where I'm from. And there was a lot of farmers and ranchers and non-Native people that fought back against this pipeline route, saying we're absolutely not going to sign any easements. We're not going to allow it to come across our land. And so when you see the top of it, it kind of makes a hook and goes around and then comes back. And what they did was they went to Fort Berthold, which is where I'm from, and they were able to get the Mandan Hidatsa Rikara Nations to sign a lease to go through our buffalo ranch, and they threatened condemnation. Our buffalo ranch is on fee land. It was never put into trust, and so they could condemn it and take it, and that's what they said they were going to do, and so they signed it. And that is why the route now comes down this way and has to cross back over the Missouri River instead of just not having to ever cross down over here. This here is the boundary of all of the traditional treaty lands. The 1851 treaty is what you see here. And so people say, this isn't even on reservation lands. Oh, I thought you could see my pointer. I'm really using my clicker. And then the darker gray area is the government definition of where the reservation land starts. And so we've been just out here and fighting. And I remember, Cindy, you made me think of where I was when we heard the news. Well, first of all, we were listening to our radios, and we were listening to the what was happening. And it was like 2:00 in the morning when they officially announced it. And we were just standing there on the hill, and there's somebody that was standing next to me, and they were like, I need to smoke a cigarette. And I was like, you don't even smoke. What the heck are you talking about? And we're like, I know. That's how bad it is. Just give me a cigarette. I was like, I don't have a cigarette. I don't smoke. And we were just like, everybody was just like standing there on the hill looking over at the dapple lights, like thinking like, what does this mean for the movement? And so, we went to bed kind of sad, and the next day, I woke up and I walked around camp, and some people were crying. Some people were like, it's going to be okay. And some people were just like zombies, And I remember I did an interview with AJ Plus or something. And I said, you know what? With Hillary Clinton, it might have been a little bit sneakier. It might have been a little more under the table, and we would have pushed some of this stuff through. But with this guy, all the cards are laid out on the table. Everybody knows what's going to happen. I'm getting some feedback, and so it was like, at least we know exactly what to expect. And maybe if we see our enemy in that way, we can have an easier chance of fighting back against it instead of this sneaky, sly, sort of underhanded stuff. That's the way I looked at it, and was like, okay, well, we know what this guy stands for, and we can maybe fight it easier. So if you go to the next slide there, I'll continue. And so, we organized, this is a march that we did. We organized to defend the sacred. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, this particular slide, is because that is still our goal, and always has been for over 500 years, is defend the sacred. And what does that mean? Well, to us, the sacred is water, the sacred is the air, the sacred is the soil, and that's what we have to defend for the next 7 generations. And so our folks are continuing to organize. We're still going to be here, like we always have been. Our narrative has never changed for over 500 years. And so if you go to the next slide, it's kind of just like, oh, this is the next bump in the road. What are we going to do? Instead of just stopping this oil pipeline, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build the mini Wachoni sustained community. And there are plans in place. There are holes that are dug. There are earth lodges that are going to be built here in this next month, here at Standing Rock, in the community of Cannonball. This is just a short little glimpse, and you can look at more of our videos and pictures if you go to our Facebook page, which is Build with Standing Rock. When you go to Build with Standing Rock on the Facebook page, it links you to another link, which is our GoFundMe, to be able to raise funds for this project. We're right now, for the startup cost of this project, it's about $1.5 million. And as we continue to move into all of the plans we have for this whole entire village, we're looking at about a $6 million price tag and a long-term project. It's not just going to be done by next year. When we talk about just transition, we're talking decades. We're talking 10-year projects that need to be supported throughout the duration of that whole time, so that we don't get a running start and then fall flat and are like, oh man, where do we go from here? And so we're continuing to build this because, like I said, it's not just stop something. It's like, this is what we want to see. And in this community, it's run with gray water systems, solar systems, wind powered systems, and they're all small scale distributed kind of systems. So if you go to the next slide, the importance of this is the water, the mini, which is how they say it in Lakota, and in my language you say midi. So it's really, really similar as far as water, but it's not just a slogan. It's not just a statement. Water is life. It's no coincidence that when people are pregnant, the babies are in water. What we say is water is the first life. And when all this work that we do, no matter where we're from, no matter the color of our skin, no matter what age we are, basic necessity of all humanity, that of all life, the thing that we all need to protect is this water. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to share with you this moment. Like literally just like a minute after my little daughter was born, this was captured. And it just grounds me in like why I do what I do. And I'm just getting so emotional looking at this picture. It's so important that those that can't speak for themselves have somebody that has a voice for them. And I think that's what we do as Grassroots Global Justice. We all come together and we use our voice and we amplify it by the unity and the collective power that we have. And we do it for the next 7 generations. This is Ayana here at camp. My daughter, she's 3 now. And I asked her what she wanted to be for Halloween. And she said, "Mama, I'd be a bee." And it was so amazing because of what's happening with the bees right now. And she wanted to be a bee and wanted to get out there and walk around camp and show everybody some happiness. And so we're part of the Keep It in the Ground coalition as well. And that's kind of the thought process, is to keep the oil, gas, coal, all of those things in the ground and use the natural resources, the sun that shines on our face every day, the wind that blows across our skin, and use these gifts that we're given by the Creator, God, however you want to say it, Buddha, whatever it means for anybody. Those are the things that are the most important that we need to be protecting. And that's why we need to be able to have resources to do the things that we know how to do, that we know we can do, and we can win. We just need to have support and long-term support in order to do this just transition for our kids and for all of the four-leggeds, the winged, everything that swims, that can't speak, because we're going to be continuing to speak for them regardless of who the president of this country is. We're going to continue that narrative around protecting and defending the sacred. So Matikarats, thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
Now I can.
Cool. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Dawn Phillips, and I'm the director of Right to the City Alliance and also at Causa Justa Just Cause here in the Bay Area. And I've been inspired to share a little bit about my election night story from Cindy and Kandi, which I think does kind of tie in a little bit with some of the other remarks that I was going to make. Some of you probably know, but election night here in the Bay for Causa Justa, for many of our sister organizations, APEN, ACE, a bunch of our union and labor partners, was a pretty historic night. In part, what was happening here in the Bay Area was that after almost 40 years, there was a multi-city wave of an electoral push to get rent control and tenant protections, real tenant protections on the books in 6 cities across the Bay. And literally that was the first time in over 30, almost 40 years that anything like that had been attempted, not just in the Bay actually, but in all of California. And as many of you also know, California and the Bay is experiencing what for us is a historic, unprecedented housing crisis, you know, driven by gentrification, driven by kind of global real estate and global capital. Our local communities are being, you know, quite frankly, ripped apart and completely reshaped by these economic and public policy forces that have been, to a large extent, decades in the making. So what was happening on election night here on the East Coast, on the West Coast in the Bay, was that we were at the victory party, right, for the local Oakland campaign. And we turned on the live feed on the big TV that we had on. And because it was just 8 o'clock and polls had just closed where we were, we flipped it to the national. And immediately, like well, almost immediately, like within 10 minutes of looking at what was happening, a couple of things happened. One, everybody in the room started to say, turn that shit off. That was the first reaction that people had. They're like, what the hell is going on? Turn this shit on. This is a bummer, right? And then the second thing was I started having a kind of a physical, emotional, and psychological panic attack, where, you know, and as it progressed over the next 40 minutes, and they started to call Florida, and, you know, and they were starting to call the early Rust Belt states, I started, you know, literally going around the room to some of my colleagues and saying, I was like, I think this is going to happen. And I don't want to come across sounding like I had any inkling that this was going to happen. I did not at all. It was an entire shock in that moment. And people started saying, you know, we need to just concentrate on the fact that we're winning locally, right? And so by the end of that night, you know, so an hour and a half in fact, Trump had won. We were still in the middle of having our party, but in the relatively same period of time, it became clear that we had won some tremendous victories locally and regionally around the fights that so many of us had invested thousands of hours in over the last couple of years. So this deep juxtaposition of what we have made possible because of deep organizing at the local level, and really what the state of our national political landscape is, there was for me no more stark example, right, of where we are. So to return to my prepared comments, you know, many people have been saying that what's needed in this moment is for us to just double down on what we've been doing, right? Which is basically this idea that the best response in this moment is for us to do more of the same. And I think our alliances would say that we partially agree with that, right? And then probably we want to bring and add some more thoughts to the discussion, right? The truth is that now more than ever, there is a need for deep organizing and power building in working class communities of color, in Native communities, etc. This is a moment that highlights the need for leadership of color, feminist leadership, queer and women's leadership, and the need to build municipal level organizing and resistance. We are in a moment where the work of local organizing in working class communities of color and centering the leadership of our communities nationally is no longer a moral assertion, but a clearly strategic one, right? It is not going to be enough, however, to just double down on this work, important as it is. It is critical that in this moment, we have to figure out how to evolve and take things to the next level. While all of our alliances are deeply grounded in the translocal organizing approach, which is the method of connecting local organizing to national and international struggles and campaigns, we know that we have to take this work and ramp it up even more in the years ahead if our communities are going to be protected and defended. We know that there has to be much more deeper movement coordination and alignment, that we have to be more effective in leveraging our strengths and impact, and that we must commit to being more than the sum of our individual capacities. This is a large part of why our alliances have come together under this joint banner of It Takes Roots. Because we know that while opportunities for national policy change will be much more limited, that the need and opportunity for true movement building from the very local to the national and international is going to be really what pushes us through in this next period. It's our strong belief that our alliances have some unique contributions to make in this moment. All of us have invested in developing ideas and models for alternative economic, housing, energy, social systems and relations over a long period of time. And we know that if we're going to be able to connect strong local resistance with innovative alternative models, that we have a chance of not only succeeding to protect and defend our communities in the next period, but we might actually strengthen and make them more resilient. It is clear that operationalizing this approach will require investment in critical infrastructure, both at the local and national level. And there has to be investment in local organizing, both in places where it's already happening and where it is not yet happening. We know that locales like New York, LA, Boston, and the Bay serve as incubators and movement hubs for developing models, frameworks, and approaches that impact communities around the country. But we also know that there's powerful organizing that has to be supported on Indigenous land, in smaller communities, non-urban, rural communities, and in communities in the South and the Midwest. There can be no national impact and change without the critical foundation of local organizing. There also has to be investment in national infrastructure so that our alliances can provide support to groups across the country. It is really at the national level that we can best leverage capacities that many local groups do not have. Things from strategic research and communications, resources for large-scale mobilizations, training and skill building, as well as developing the broader narratives and messaging that will connect and tie our numerous fights across the country in a coherent and inspiring way. Please consider investing and supporting in this vision today. Thank you.
Okay. So can y'all hear me online? In the Zoom world? It's great. So the benefit of being the last speaker is to feel the support and the love of those that came before you. And I feel that very much as coming in as a new executive director for CJA. Hey, good to see you. And to also see like our funder community come in and support. So we're all going on that same theme of where were you when the elections results came out. I was with all our staff trying to plan out our first quarter of our 4-year strategy for CJA, a strategy that was approved by membership, that had a lot of excitement, was long time in coming. And we were having dinner on U Street in DC, and you could see as the hours progressed, you could hear it. The elections were everywhere. It's DC, right? And people were they just couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe it. And we walked in the next day to our, new CJA DC office saying, what are we going to do? And how do we look at our CJA strategy and see if it's still relevant? And we walked through that strategy and it was more relevant than ever. We didn't cut anything out of that strategy. What we did was actually do a couple of pivots. So we increased our work around labor. Like we really knew labor had to be an important part of our work because of the shift in the red states and because of the Rust Belt. We started to also look at definitely amplifying and accelerating our regional hubs, right? We had a plan in our strategy to do regional hubs. We decided to amplify that. And then we worked really closely with GGJ and said, look, we need to bring our funders in a way that brings them in early so that they're walking and working with us. And I think our goal in having this meeting with you all, those that are here in the room with us, but also those 84 participants on Zoom, is to say, funders are part of our community in a way that's really substantial. We want to influence you. We want to be able to inform your strategies as you are moving forward in a way that leads to impact that makes sense to you all and impact that makes sense to us. And so that's part of what we're trying to do, right? We have this vision of growing with the grassroots, but we also have this vision of growing multi-sectorally. And so we've done some multi-sector meetings, as Cindy mentioned, and we want through CJA, for example, we're going to be hiring a funder engagement organizer that's really going to, and build this culture that's really going to build our work together. And so, how do we build co-learning opportunities together? How do you really understand how the grassroots work? And it's great to see Taj in the back there, because I know he's done a tremendous amount of work trying to do that. So, and others in the room. So, I just wanted to start off with that. Can you, Sean, put on the PowerPoint? Yeah, so I think for this, as I progressively move into this role, a very new role for me, and also think about what this political moment means. Obviously terror, all these number of emotions, right, that fall through you. But for me at this moment, I really think it's an awakening. And you can hear how it's an awakening by how our colleagues here have been shifting their strategies, amplifying them, and really thinking at this moment as a rethink, a react, like you should be able to react to the terror in a way that's positive and that's building for a long term. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is mid and long term strategy. And then finally, how do we reinvest in our power in a way that's substantial? And I believe that we all have the power to reinvest. And so we're doing some really interesting things around that. Can you move to the second slide? A big part of that is what Kandi talked about a lot in terms of the just transition, right? So we want to be building a mid to long-term strategy that moves us out of the extractive economy, moves us into a regenerative economy. We understand the economy is so important. It was really what moved us over into this place. And we know that's why labor is an important part. It's been an important part of the just transition, and it'll continue to be an important part like that. But we understand we need to lead with some bold social movements. We see how that has been influenced in the international community, and we're learning for that. We have, for example, in March, the movement of Dam Affected Peoples is working with CJ and other groups here in GGJ to bring in an international group of folks that have been dealing with extractive energy, extreme energy, and to learn to build together in that way. And we're also thinking about how do we expand what's politically possible. And I think what Dawn mentioned online about like that moment where there were so many wins at the local level, you know, and the contrast of what's happening at the national level is a real guide on how we should be kind of pivoting our strategy. So I think to summarize, you know, this just transition strategy that we have through CJ in the 4-year plan is about being bold, right? We're planning on having 50 just transition communities come out from now through 2020. We're also figuring out how we can have a just transition dialogue and framework within the climate justice broader community. We understand the threats on climate because of the new administration, and we also know the promises that just transition can provide in this moment. And so we're trying to assure that that kind of framework and narrative is part of the climate dialogue from here on forward. And I think politically, it's important to continue to reinforce that climate, you know, and energy democracy, an energy democracy that represents Indigenous communities, that represents frontline communities, that goes beyond the CPP and the state implementation plans, is really the basis of, and it really is a basis of a movement issue, right? So that continues to be a movement issue that then strengthens our colleagues that are from other movements. Oh, that's my alarm to do something. Whoa. Let me mute that. Wait. Okay. Right. So let's move into the third slide, because I'm looking at time here. So a really important way to continue fighting the bad and building the new, we're using this Reinvest in Our Power framework. And I think this is an exciting framework for definitely our funder colleagues to look into. It's a format that allows us to create democratic and decentralized community-controlled finance. And our goal through the Climate Justice Alliance with partners like the Working World, the Divest Student Network, Movement Generation, and others, is to be able to create 5 to 10 non-extractive just transition loans that would be looking at how to do renewable energy, focus on clean energy, but also could work on other sectoral shifts within just transition, affordable housing, food sovereignty, land issues, water issues. And so we're being really bold about wanting to create this. There is already an extensive peer network that is part of the finance cooperatives that are already building on worker cooperative businesses, right? We understand that, you know, not only is Trump committing to just giving away our democracy for corporatism, but there is also a strong worker cooperative movement happening in the US that we need to continue to support. And we put a climate framework on it that could actually be a place where we have an avenue to have success. So I think, you know, between the just transition and the Reinvest in Our Power work, there are some models here that could really benefit us in the mid to long term. So can you switch the slide, please? I'm trying to get out of the full screen here. So I wanted to take just a couple minutes to really talk to you as funders, because I've worked with the Building Equity and Alignment Initiative, where we've worked 3 sectors together, talking about, you know, where do we find alignment and where can we actually create greater shifts to bring resources to the grassroots. So I think in terms of aligning values with our investments, the divestment piece in the campaign where, you know, Standing Rock was amazing in creating an alignment with our values in the divestment of grassroots people everywhere, to take money out and reinvest them in places where they felt they could actually be more aligned with their values. So credit unions and things like that. We believe that the Reinvest in Our Power campaign could actually be a greater place that aligns with their values. I think in transforming relationships, like communities are ready for investment, but some of the transformation in relationships have to happen. And I think not only in relationships, but the language that we use when we talk about climate, when we talk about energy, and we have to relate it more to things that are really important to people, like housing, displacement, water, land, food, and the growing need to recognize Indigenous sovereignty. And that's all very critically linked to climate justice in a way that continues to resonate with communities at a local and state and regional level. And then finally, I also believe that grassroots and philanthropy is entering into a new dynamic relationship, and this opportunity is giving us that chance to do that in a way that allows us to co-learn from each other. And I think, you know, we will continue to have these opportunities where we will bring the funder community together with the grassroots directly to be able to further understand a common framework for addressing the challenges we have forward. So things like addressing the multi-alliance work, potentially having discussions around just transition, energy democracy, especially as we see the threats that are happening around the CPP and the Paris Agreement, things like that. So that's more of an invitation for you all. And finally, I want to kind of finish with inviting you all to, so it's 12 o'clock right now. Oh, we go to 1:15? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really good at passing notes. Hi, y'all. Wanted to see if everybody online could go to 1:15. This is probably the last slide, but we also wanted to take some questions from those online and also take a couple questions from those in the room. Our understanding initially was that we weren't going to have the room after 1, but we actually do. So I'm just going to try to wrap up as soon as possible so we can go straight to the questions. Thank you for being flexible. So I just want to mention a couple of vehicles and strategies that have been valuable, that we've been hearing from our grassroots folks that have been valuable. So the rapid response, and obviously, you know, directly funding the alliances that have been part of this funder briefing is most important. Funding It Takes Roots delegation to continue the alignment work, but also do the trans-local work that will follow in the next 100 days. The rapid response vehicles have been tremendously valuable. What we've heard is we need to up the amounts that are available for rapid response. We've also heard that obviously donating to the Reinvest in Our Power work, that'll start off this year and endure for the next 4 years, and then we'll have an evaluation of that. But I think part of what we're really hearing is that folks need funding to be able to do the assessment necessary to then pivot. And everything's happening so quickly that folks just don't have that general operating support to be able to do the assessments, to bring the people in the room. I mean, that is really expensive. We put out a call, some funders supported us, but we had to pull from general operating expenses to do that. And, you know, if we wanted to continue those conversations, support for that is really valuable. So to close off, I just think, you know, the more that we can create a collective plan together that addresses the needs of the grassroots, the needs of the funder, the community, and the needs of even, you know, the Greens, where do they play a space in our work? Supporting the frontline leadership is super important to allow us to sustain and transform our collective community, you know, beyond the next election. So thank you so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and take up 2 questions in the room, and then we'll take 2 questions online, and then we'll let everybody kind of answer. Okay.
Hi. Am I going first? Great. Hi, friends. It's a real inspiration to be part of this conversation. This is Mateo calling in from Oakland, Berkeley, from Movement Generation. So various funder allies have put forth key strategic questions. So I'm just going to put them out quickly. One question was, how do we build a stronger funder and field strategy space to strategically invest in organizing policies and strategies to win? And a corollary question with this one is, will someone explain how do we fund this cross-network alliance? And then the other question, which is really two questions, is more about the work on the ground. One is a strategic question: how will the coalition or these alliances work with white and mainstream allies? And the final question, which has already been threaded into some of the responses, but is key, is how do we distribute our organizing energy between resisting bad government policies and actions versus building the grassroots solutions? And thank you all for submitting the questions. Sorry that I couldn't fill them all in.
Thank you, Mateo. And it sounds like we had a little glitch and we were hearing from both the room and the Zoom at the same time. So Angela is going to repeat back to us what they heard in the room. And then Mateo, if you could just chat those into the box and I'll make sure they get them. All right, so we're going to bring Angela back on. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, so you're testing my listening skills here. All right, so what was her name? Eliana asked a question about the assessment piece. So we talked about there being a need from the grassroots for funding to help groups have time to assess the political moment and then to bring people together. And, you know, she wanted some more details about that. And then the second question, was that right? Yeah. And then the second question was to have a little more deepening around the labor. You know, how are we working with labor? What are the plans, and how, you know, the election has affected that?
So, want to take on the labor piece, and I could do the assessment?
Oh, I thought we were taking all questions
Oh,
first.
we're taking all questions. All right.
Okay, so Mateo now, right?
Mateo, let's give me 1 second and then we'll have you just share those again. And can you hear Mateo in the room?
I'm repeating them live. Great. So the first set of kind of cluster questions is, how do we build a stronger funder and field strategy space to strategically invest in organizing policies and strategies to win? And will someone please explain how to fund this cross-network alliance? And then the second cluster of questions was, you know, how will this coalition work with, you know, white and mainstream allies? And how do we distribute our organizing energy between resisting bad policy and actions from the government versus building the grassroots solutions?
Great. So I'm going to ask if we can just, given that we're over time, thanks everyone for staying on. If we can just go 1 minute, respond to any of the questions you want. So let's start with Kandi, since we're still on this audio, and then we'll go to Dawn, and then we'll go back to the room for Cindy and Angela. So Kandi, take it away.
Why'd you have to start with me? I think there were so many questions that were in there that I think that the biggest, I think for communicating across cross-cultural things is like, if there could be funding for people to go to the various places where things are happening, because of the significance of understanding culture and place, you have to be there, I think is one of the biggest things. And so supporting each other by going here to support this and going here to support that, which is something we kind of do, but it's kind of difficult and tricky. I think we can continue. I think we are working together. I think that we do have white allies that are working with the folks of color. And I think that the biggest significant thing is, again, going there and being there at that place. And basically the way that the work can be funded is you just go to the webpage and click donate on that donate button. I don't know, there's probably a better way to have conversations and stuff too, but I know that most of our pages have that donate button where you can click on it, or like some kind of a page where you can help. But I really like to have conversations and one-on-one conversations with people. So if anybody wants to come to my community or invite me to their community, or IEN, vice versa, I'm just going to leave it there and next person can continue.
Thanks, Kandi. And Don, do we have you? We can't hear you for some reason. Let's see. Okay, how about now, Don? Still can't hear you. Okay, we're gonna come back to Don and go to the room first, and we'll figure out what's going on. So, okay, Cindy, you're up.
All right. So one of the things that we did pretty immediately after the election is that we actually developed a survey that 3 of the alliances did with our membership, and kind of asking them what was it that they were, sort of assessing, where were they at, what were their needs. And one of the things that actually came up very high on the list was the need for strategic kind of assessment, and being able to understand what does this moment mean for folks. And so for example, for next week, we are bringing part of, we're doing a 1-day training lab, and then we're doing a half-a-day strategy sort of space. Because I think that's one of the things that folks have been really yearning for, is how to be able to kind of share assessments about what does this mean, but also cross-share examples. So you're doing 21st century community defense, sanctuary cities in an expanded model. How are you doing it? You all are getting ready to fight back the attacks on Muslim people in like folks at Drum in New York City. So I think that people are wanting to cross share, and so part of what we're trying to figure out is how to replicate. So what we're saying, what we're doing next week, we want to be able to replicate in the next 100 days and beyond, so that basically cross-sectoral tables almost could be created at the local level, so people can be doing that level of assessment. So so we've been doing that as CJA. We're a member of CJA. We did that. We spent the whole day doing some of that strategic assessment. We brought together over 25 people, again, very rapidly. And I think that's one of the things that's one of the examples of how we're trying to do that. The second question is around sort of what our need is. And I think that the alliances have been intentional, like we've made a commitment to each other to work together through this period, at least through the 100 days and obviously beyond, but concretely. And so we've created a budget for our delegation to DC and to the Women's March for the January 20th mobilizations and the Women's March, and then this training lab and strategic space. But we've also made an agreement that we want to do actions, translocal actions in different cities. And so we had a call late last night, like at 8 o'clock at night, with cities from all over the country that are doing it. So bringing together all of our alliance members together where they want to be able to do actions. And again, talking to Movement for Black Lives, talking to the people at Surge, talking to other folks to be able to say, how can we create these translocal actions around that? And that hopefully, again, we want to really support an organic process where there is synergy, support that, and where there's just, we're coming together for 1 day, that's all good, and I think, but part of it is being able to sort of apply some level of support for people doing some of that translocal actions. And so the direct ask, at least for us, we've created a bare bones budget between the alliances is for this 100 days is $100,000 for 100 days. And that includes covering some of the costs that we've put forward already for next week. But that we also created a collective budget between Right to the City, GGJ, and CJA around sort of a broader kind of real budget around our programmatic work that we can share with folks after this call if you're interested. And we've developed a concept paper around this work. And so I think our hope is that this kind of strategic alignment will evaluate and figure out this doesn't include, we're both members, CJA and GGJ are members of the People's Climate Mobilization. That budget doesn't include that. That would be another budget for the mobilization for the People's Climate for that on April 29th. But I think that part of what we're trying to figure out is assess from there what strategies come forward, and then I think we're also trying to see what's the administration going to do. And I think kind of getting us ready and flexible for that.
Great, I'll stay on. Okay, so Shaw, should I continue, or do you want to let folks leave if they need to leave? And I can answer. Tell me what to do.
Let's give Don 1 minute.
Okay, cool. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Can
you.
folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I think Cindy said a lot and Kandi said a lot. I'll add a couple more things and hand it over to Angela. I think the question about balancing or what the tension will be between resisting bad policies or defending against attacks versus building is actually really pretty well positioned to kind of contend with. The reality, I think, is that we don't know, but I think the short answer is that we're going to have to do both, right? Many of us are already anticipating and preparing for the fact that we organize in Black communities and Native communities, in immigrant communities. We organize women, queer folks. So we are clear of what the heightened attacks on communities are going to be. So the kind of thinking around really what is a way more expanded and strategic vision of sanctuary cities, sanctuary communities, really like just what the level of defense is that is going to be required. I think it's actually stuff that a lot of our alliances have some level of experience engaging. And I think that if there was a possibility to secure investment support, I think that many of us would be really ready to be able to scale up, share those approaches, share those, and really actually be able to be much better positioned in terms of kind of protection and defense work. But the truth is, our alliances have also always been about vision and alternatives, always, right? And the just transition framework, the feminisms, the grassroots feminisms framework, right to the city's vision of alternative land and housing models. These are things that we have invested way before this Trumpist era. And that also we have struggled. And if we had more investment, I think that we are in a position to do both. And I think that to some extent, what is needed is going to be continuing to pivot back and forth and toggle between those two approaches, because I think for many of our communities, it's not an option to do one versus the other. I think we need those alternatives to be strong and developed, in as much as we need strong defenses and strong protective models and approaches right now. So I'll just stop there and hand it over to Angela.
All right, thanks so much. Just want to do a time check. We said folks were trying to leave at 1:15. Allison's assured us that we can stay as long as we want, so we could be around after for those that are in the room to kind of mingle and do a happy hour style kind of thing. But I wanted to respond to the labor question and briefly about the funder and field strategy piece. So for the labor piece, you know, CJ started off with when it started off as an alignment process, it started working with labor was a key part of that work, is from my understanding, you know, just being 4 months into the organization. And we have a number of labor groups that are part of CJ that have been actually helping us really frame the strategy on labor now. Through the PCM, we started to have discussions with BGA about aligning environmental justice, climate justice groups with the labor groups. And during the time that we, you know, when AFL-CIO came out in support of the Dakota Access Pipeline, we put out a statement asking AFL-CIO for a sit down to discuss, you know, how we can actually come out with more visionary plans, right? And through that process, we've had one meeting, and that meeting was really positive. So just to be clear, it was with the meeting was with the labor groups of BGA and some of the leadership. So we didn't have the Greens in the room, and I think, you know, there's different dynamics between environmental justice groups that have a very clear labor perspective and include labor as our communities, and some of the green perspective that are more focused on that kind of the strict environmental piece there. And so what we've come out with that meeting, just came off of a call last week, was that we wanted to look at pilot sites where there is either really strong EJ and labor work already happening, or in places that seem like a good opportunity, or we need them. So obviously the Midwest we're targeting. There's going to be the South. Louisiana is probably going to be one of them. And then we're looking at somewhere along the West Coast, maybe Washington, maybe California, and then New York, because there's already historic good work happening there. Labor is, I mean, they are going through a transformation. Whether it's good, bad, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know that they need to continue building the base, and that's where EJ-CJ connects really strongly with labor. You know, it's in a process. We're just starting to have that conversation. We also have a lot of our groups that have been strongly working with labor rank and file, right? And so CJ is looking at building with the national groups, but also our communities are building with the rank and file in a different way. And all of that is part of building this just transition, transforming divestment, looking at how we get labor to align with EJ to build an infrastructure plan that really works for people, planet, and works, right? Like actually does work. So that's a little bit on labor. We can talk a little bit more about that. In terms of funder and field strategy, you know, there are a lot of pool funds coming up. I would suggest you get a grassroots person in on that board. I think that's just like fundamentally one thing that you can do to assure that there's that perspective, right? You know, the B has been fundamental in assuring that there's like these shifts of culture. These, I know they're bringing out a bunch of research by the end of the year that'll help support, you know, making the case to your board that having grassroots and funder relationships are really important. And I think things like Shake the Foundation that's developing new is super exciting, and we're sitting on their board now, and they're looking at how to use the divestment piece to actually get funding out of some of you know, the fossil fuel industry and bring it into really positive places. So those are some examples. And then I would invite you to continue working with CJ, GGJ, and all our alliances on these kind of funder briefings, because you know, we're definitely going to have more of those. We're going to be, if you want, we're going to be sharing the recording so you can share it with your colleagues. We thank everyone that's in this room that came directly in this sunny day in New York, a very warm, sunny day in New York. And for all of those that came on shot, do you want to facilitate us into a new space?
Well, I think this is where we close, and I don't know if Allison was going to speak, or are we just closing here?
Okay, so if we're closing, I just wanted to, I thought Allison was going to speak, but no, we're closing. We just want to express appreciation to Serdna, Allison, Makesha for helping us out and actually providing the space. It's a great role model of what we hope we can do in the future.
And thank you to
Thank you, Shah. Thank you, Mateo.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Good job, guys.